Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Discovery Speaker Series. This is going to be our second to last Discovery Speaker Series. We'll be taking a break during the spring and summer, and then we'll come back in October 2022 for the next round. So, my name is Clarissa, and I'm the Program and Volunteer Coordinator at the Puget Sound Estuarium. And I run this program called Discovery Speaker Series, where we invite educators, scientists, artists, earth advocates to come on and share their current work, or if they're part of a program, or if they're working on a project, so that way they can help share their work with a broader audience. So I do want to thank you for joining us, and I hope you enjoy learning about birds. So today we've got 3 speakers, and so we're going to save our questions to the very end. We also have the coloring page that goes along with these Discovery Speaker Series, and you can download that from our website or from Facebook and color along as you listen in. So today I've got some exciting guests, and I will have them introduce themselves. We've got Elaine, we've got Tiffany, and we've got Terrence.
Is that what you wanted us to do, Clarissa?
Welcome, Elaine.
Hey, we're all volunteers here. My name's Elaine, and I'm a bird nut. I think that's all I'm going to say, because we got better things to do with our time.
My name is Tiffany. I am a bird enthusiast and naturalist.
And my name is Terrence, and I'm a bird scientist or a bird biologist.
Incredible.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Thanks, Elaine, Tiffany, and Terrence for joining in our Discovery Speaker Series. To start off, we're going to have Elaine and Tiffany, and they're going to talk about how you can become a birder, how they became birders, and then we're going to pass it over to Terrence, and we're going to learn about how you can be part of a citizen science program with the Pigeon Gilmout.
Huge thanks to Puget Sound Estuarium for reaching out to the 3 of us and making it possible for Tiffany and me to meet with you all in our PSE family room tonight, where we get to launch this time together. May I now take the privileged opportunity to say that our gathering today is broadcast across what birding folks refer to as the Puget Sound lowlands. We here acknowledge that these are the traditional homes of the Coast Salish, Duwamish, Nisqually, and Stachus Squaxian peoples, who have stewarded these lands and waters for generations and are still here. Our enjoyment and study of birds and their habitats extend across vast and far-flung regions. We honor the place of indigenous peoples and their ancestral territories everywhere. And on that note, dare we glance back over our collective shoulders? 2 years of this? I want to reach out and hug everyone in 3D, but we're doing it virtually, and for a little longer, stay resilient. On the right here is one of our favorite graphics, we bird nutties. Keep one turkey vulture space between you and others, 6 feet. Let's do this. Let's get our wingtips together into, even if you've never really thought about paying attention to birds, into getting off to and into birds. Tiffany and I are going to, in this 30 minutes that we have, kind of have an ambitious agenda here, we want to touch on what we think it is about birds that's so captivating. Give us a little approach on what it is about appreciating birds, some of the behavioral things that we need to do. And then we're going to go on a virtual birding field trip. Next, we'll visit some of the usual suspects here in the Pacific Northwest and touch on some of the resources, a little on equipment and the ethics of birding, hoping that some of you who maybe have never spent any time thinking or watching or listening to birds in a dedicated way will find this to be your gateway drug into that activity. Of course, your questions later. Clarissa, could you give us a hand? Do you know what these are and what do they have in common?
They look like two very colorful birds.
Oh my gosh, indeed. Well, I'm old. By the way, this is a painted bunting on the left and an American kestrel on the right. I'm old, and I think when Clarissa asked us to do this, I'm not sure she realized where I was on my birding adventure, but this was what we call our spark bird. A spark bird is the one that just made you go, really? And believe it or not, this was in the 1970s, 1970s, that this species of bird caught my attention and its beautiful sound. And then I got busy with a lot of things for another 40, 50 years. So it's rather latish in life that I started transitioning into becoming a true blue bird nutty in the last 10 years or so. And along the way, I clearly have been captivated by the magical two-way street that is volunteering. Volunteering starts with one. Terrence, Pigeon Gilmots are to get you all excited. Tiffany, tell us about you and your spark bird.
Well, this spark bird right here is an American kestrel. And I started originally birding in Central Park. That was my first ever bird trip. And when I saw this falcon, my mind was just blown at how colorful this bird is. And I had my little point and shoot camera and I took a picture of it. And ever since then, I've been birding.
Now, how old were you, Tiffany? How old were you, roughly?
I was about 24. I was about 24 years old.
Wonderful. In New York. I want you all to listen carefully because we got the New Yorker here.
Oh, yeah. Big Apple, all day, bacon, egg, and cheese, Timberland. But most importantly, birds.
Excellent. Well, you see, Tiffany and I do sort of represent two ends of birding. And we just had Chinese New Year, right? So we're kind of the yin yang of this presentation. You can jump on the bandwagon anywhere. All right. Well, what is it about birds that is so captivating? I mean, the flying part is pretty cool. Bald eagle, bufflehead duck, group of Dunlin here. I mean, flying is pretty neat. And don't forget landing, because landing can be quite exciting too.
Especially if you're a puffin.
All right. Take it away, Tiffany.
So what is it about birds that's so captivating? Well, they connect us to nature. In fact, birding was the very, I guess, gateway into being a naturalist. And I'm proud of that. And they occupy a special place in our senses. I have never heard things so acutely than when I started birding by ear. I feel like my hearing has gotten better.
I'm with you. And my gosh, could we please have the chance here to introduce you to the epitome of cute? On the left side of your slide, you see a male and then a female red-breasted nuthatch. They are right here outside. And this little nuthatch is going to show you what he does, if I can make this work. He he's excavating in the springtime, maybe to create a nest cavity. And believe it or not, this is right on my deck, which is 10 feet away from where I'm sitting right now. But in the daytime, at the right time of year, if you have a little food out, a little water to attract them, listen carefully. I think you can hear him talking to his girlfriend. By the way, that was another bird chiming in from the background. Anyone know what that is? That means Tiffany or Clarissa, because the rest of you can't tell us. Let me see if I can play that again.
Yes, please.
Let me see if I can play it again for us. Not that. Here. That's him. All that other stuff.
Wow.
What was that, Tiffany? It was a song sparrow. And this is the other dimension. I mean, we get these gorgeous birds to look at and sometimes photograph. Look at his little feet. He's taken off there. But their sounds are just enchanting. And whether you're a musical person or not, turn your ears on and you cannot help but be brought in. Tiffany, take us away.
Interaction galore. Through birding, I met so many awesome people. Dun, 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 Elaine. For example, engagement and enrichment. I mean, birding is really what opened up my senses to the outside world. And now I don't just see nature, but I see nature. I see it in details now. So very much engaged and enriched whenever I go outside. Wonderful,
wonderful. And guess what? There are extras that come with birding. There are lessons in habitat, and you get to expand your vocabulary. Clarissa, you are expert in helping us understand what is an estuary.
So yeah, hopefully I know this one. Estuary is where you've got the fresh water from rivers mixing with the salt water from the ocean.
Fantastic. This happens to be a little scene on the Duwamish River up our end of this Puget Sound area. Riparian. Does anyone know that word? Raise your hand. I'm just kidding because we won't see you raise your hand. Riparian is a new word to some of us. That implies that we are at the edge of the river, freshwater, and the land. So critters that love that edge are riparian habitat lovers. Go, Tiffany.
Expand your vocabulary. You gotta learn your plants, trees, and shrubs, your insects, your spiders, and other invertebrates. You gotta learn your fungi, because the fungi, and so much more. And this is all true because when I learned birding, I also had to learn about trees. So I'm not just calling every tree a green tree when I'm pointing out a bird. So that was helpful. And trees are pretty awesome in themselves.
Yes, they are little stands for birds, right? Okay, now
and much more.
Now this is a little bit of, I guess, just natural things you would think of, but it takes some thinking sometimes and saying for some of us that it takes a certain mindset to go bird watching or go birding. Birding implying everything about watching the behavior, appreciating what's going on in the world of birds. It takes a certain mindset and a certain set of behavioral modifications. I mean, for example, if you have friends that like to go jogging and having long conversations while you're out, don't take them with you birding. There's a lot of time and need to sit or stand quietly and let the birds and all of nature calm down from your weird presence, get back to what they were doing, because that's what you want to appreciate. We cultivate a patient curiosity that's not part of our current world. Oh my God, the way people drive today, they're in a rush to get to that red light. No, just enjoy rolling up there. No. Anyway, patient curiosity with a sharp attunement to noticing things, whether it's movement or a little sound or something. You get to be a detective. You're a snoop. You're a voyeur. You're trying to pick up on everything that's happening out there with these heightened senses that you're using to pick up the very first sounds, movements. Go ahead, Tiffany.
Well, why not start nearby? Your courtyard, your street corner, your yard, anywhere that's close to you. More than likely, you'll spot a bird and get to know some of your neighborhood birds, your friendly everyday pigeon, your house sparrow, your awesome starlings. And of course, there's more than that. So all you have to do is open up your eyes and your mind.
Excellent, excellent. Well, in just a moment, we're going to go off on a virtual field trip. I am mind-boggled to recognize that it's been 10 months ago. 10 months ago, Tiffany and I and Brian, a very fine birder friend, we went to a place some of you might know. In fact, I think, Terrence, you know Scribner Park. It's up north in the Everett, Edmonds area. It's just a park, and it has a little pond and has a little boardwalk, and we chose it to go and try to, in our sort of clumsy way, demonstrate how we talk to each other a little, how we adjust things on our binoculars, like the oculars, the right and left, and take a look. I hope it'll be of some use to you. And of course, you can always go back and watch it and pause it, I hope, if it does have something useful to offer. Thank you for playing that video. Am I supposed to stop sharing? No. Clarissa, I'm not hearing anything. I don't know if you have any control.
Like my tech people on the back end, I think.
That's okay. If they can't do it, I will do my best to provide a poor second version of what we were saying. The bird that you just saw a little of was a black cap chickadee, and she or he was, oh, we're going to go back to the beginning. All right. This was in March of 2021. Oh, I love it. I get to look at Tiffany. Hey, Clarissa, do you know what bird your logo is modeled upon?
I'm pretty sure it's the lesser yellowlegs.
Yes. Thank you. There you go. Black cap chickadee. Chickadee dee dee. Chickadee dee dee. All right, so if you're adjusting the right and left binoculars, the binoculars for a person who, like me, wears glasses, you want those little cups down. They're down, and now Tiffany's gonna screw them, or sometimes they pop up, so that someone who doesn't wear glasses has the perfect distance between the glasses and it. And some of us, believe it or not, our right and left eyes are a little off from each other, and there's a way of adjusting something, which Brian's going to show you here. Usually on the right-sided ocular, it will adjust so that you can get both eyes to focus together. That really takes some one-to-one to do. And here we go for a little walk at Scribner Park. Scriber. Did you hear that?
There's a red-winged blackbird over there in the tree.
It's pointing out there's a red-winged blackbird over in the tree, which we heard. First we heard it, then we looked. Happens to be, for some of you medium or advanced birders, a male. He's in his first year. He hasn't quite gotten his beautiful epaulets, but his brain is telling him to act like a boy. Beautiful little park. There's a you hear that jit-it, jit-it, jit-it. This is one of our wonderful little birds that visits from the late fall to sometime around now. Ruby crown kinglet. There you go with his ruby crown.
The bird that I saw, it was small, it was yellow, it wasn't olive, but I didn't see any streaking to indicate a yellow warbler. So I'm a bit confused with that one. It was splitting and like kinglet behavior.
Yeah, it kind of had that thin bill like a team, but I didn't see any streaks on the breast either.
Yeah.
Now from the lake, Brian's going to try to help us
Affiliated woodpecker
find a bird that
across
he's
the lake.
got.
You see those two tall conifer trees?
Yeah.
Straight down between them, there's a dead tree with no limbs that just looks like a spike.
Oh.
It's about 2/3 up that big.
Oh my gosh, look at that.
Woodpecker has some red. It's a woodpecker.
Oh, woodpecker.
Any of you remember Woody the Woodpecker? Ha ha ha! Ha ha ha! Woody the Woodpecker was modeled after the pileated woodpecker, sometimes called the pileated.
Female bufflehead a little bit further to the right by the green grass in front of the dead cattails.
So you have to know some of the plants to be able to tell your friend where to look to see the bufflehead duck. Aren't you cute?
There's a pair of mallards swimming right.
Mr. and Mrs. Mallard. Oh, one of our favorites, a brown creeper. And it sang, "Trees, beautiful trees."
This is an example of a bush tit nest.
Gorgeous birds, tiny little things that build a nest using just their bills and feet. So these were all birds that were around there at Scriber Park.
Well, when you hear a bird calling, it's got to be two, because they're not talking to you.
Perfect! In your best New York!
I had to go in.
Yeah.
Definitely not talking to you.
Oh, Tiffany, I love that. That was kind of the outtake. In case you couldn't understand what she said. When you hear one bird calling, you know there are two birds there because he's not talking to you. That's what she said.
I don't have anything he needs.
All right, back we go. Thank you very much for playing that. That was fun. All right, in part two, we're going to change gears, change colors. We're still really trying to get your juices flowing about what's really cool about birding. And this time, we're going to look at some of the, quote, usual suspects. And oh my gosh, the list would be 6 times as long. But trying to be realistic, here are some of the birds that in dark print, they're around all year round. And in light print, the ones that only are here part of the time. They're only here part of the time because they migrate. For example, oh my gosh, migration? Tiffany, could you tell us a little about migration?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Well, right. And so we want to know, why do birds migrate? Well, think about this. Let's say you had your favorite sandwich shop on your block. You just keep going to that sandwich shop. They have the best bacon, egg, and cheese. And then all of a sudden the sandwich shop closes, and then a new one opens way downtown, but it has the bacon, egg, and cheese that's just as good. Well, if you want to get that bacon, egg, and cheese, you're going to have to travel to get it.
Aha. So it's not because they're cold?
No, but it's all about food availability. If it's freezing cold, then a lot of insects won't be available. So birds have to go to different habitats to find the food that they need to be strong birds.
And I just have something that gives a little underpinning to that because, well, you know, it's not just birds, it's caribou, whatever, but migration means a regular seasonal movement between breeding. I should put breeding and non-breeding grounds. I mean, the Antipodes, the down under people think we're all upside down, right? But by the way, you see this red, these are flyways of various birds. This is the Arctic tern, and the Arctic tern breeds up here and goes down here. And oh my gosh, the darn bird flies. Are you listening? 44,000 miles a year round trip. 44,000 miles. That sort of thing is normal for some birds. On the left side, there are some traditional ways that birds have learned over eons to travel when they're going north and south. Okay, birds. Oh, great blue heron. The biggest, most picturesque, easy to find, common, actually, heron in North America. How many of you seen a great blue heron? Everybody's got their hand up. Yeah, and how many of you know that the great blue heron is our official city bird of Seattle, also Portland, and maybe some other cities too? A fish eater, wonderful, and, you know, a great ambassador for birding. They're big, they're easy to see, they're not really too skittish, and look what they do. All right, Tiffany. I'll have this bird call you. Tiffany.
Wow, a purple martin. Has anyone ever seen one of those funny looking gourds around the city? Well, not funny looking, awesome looking. Teardrop shaped, sometimes gourds. Well, those are called purple martin towns. Elaine, take it away.
Now, what are these two birds we see on the right and left, Tiffany?
Well, here on the left, we have an adult male purple martin. And on the far right, we have a female purple martin that has a dragonfly, which if I had time, I could tell you the dragonfly species, but I'm not going to go that deep today.
In the middle, if I may add to what Tiffany told us, this is actually a replica of John James Audubon's Birds of North America watercolor that he did of the purple martin. And you see this man-made house that's been put up for the purple martins, a dried out gourd. And it's just an example of how man and animal have been sharing and hopefully benefiting each other in ways for many, many centuries. All right. Oh, sorry, purple. And the osprey, the closest, some of you Seahawks fans, closest you can get to a Seahawk is the osprey. They do eat fish only, and they are wonderful migrating birds. Most of them right now are somewhere in South America or Central America and starting to come up this way, the ones that belong up here. You see the house made on the right side on top of a athletic field light. Well, the problem is that we've taken a lot of the trees away, dead trees. So these are big birds. They have to come down from above. They can't make a little nest deep inside of a tree. They have to come down on a dead tree or something that's got a broken off top. And we just don't allow many of those to be around. So they're an adaptable species. And here's what an osprey sounds like. Oh. One. That might be, you can hear two osprey, maybe. You can hear the male, you can hear the male perhaps coming back with a fish for the female on the nest. Wonderful birds. They'll be back in another month or so. All right, Tiff.
That lovely croak sound is the sound of a Caspian tern. It's a call, actually, not just a sound, but it's a call. And Caspian terns we can see around springtime to early summer, and they're one of the largest terns in the world. And we have the opportunity to see them. You can tell them that they're different from gulls by the shape of their wing and how skinny their wing is compared to gulls. So keep your eyes out once the summertime comes.
Don't miss the big old
keep
red
your ears
bill.
open. Oh yeah, it's beautiful. It's like fire engine red lipstick.
Right.
For bees.
Here's one that's just come down in the last month or so. The pine siskin, a lovely little bird, gorgeous yellow, needle-like bill, and they're just one of my favorites. They make this lovely sound. They're very gregarious. They travel in groups. Here are two great photos. One of great because it was by someone else. The one on the left was one I took somewhere. I can't remember, but they'll just be in hundreds flocking to some place. They're altitudinal migrants in the sense that they are up in the higher ranges and they breed in high fir trees in high altitudes, and they come down to us in the winter, a food thing, right? All right, Tiff.
And here we have one of my second favorite raptors, the red-tailed hawk. And on the left, you can see the signature red tail. And sorry, that was the left. And on the right, you can see a red-tailed hawk feeding its young.
Aren't they cute? Thank you. Here's one of my other favorites. I don't have one favorite, I guess. Killdeer. Killdeer are shorebirds. They don't swim. They don't have the right equipment for swimming, but they run along and deal with things at the edges. And on the left is an adult, a juvenile. And on the right, the cutest thing ever, a baby killdeer. Oh, oh. And just for Tiffany.
Yes. How can I forget my favorite birds ever? Gulls. And here we have a Glaucus Wingo, which is very common here in Western Washington. There you can tell Glaucus Wingos if you look at the wingtips, which are folded underneath. You can see that they are light to dark gray with white little spots. Those are called mirrors. And so,
hey, Tiffany, how many different species of gulls do you know? Oh.
Well, I've been off and on reading
off and on.
Yes, off and on. I've been off and on reading about gulls and how to identify them. I tell you, it's not easy, but so far I know, I want to say more than 7 species of gulls.
All right,
and I'm comfortable enough to identify them.
For the rest of us who are the mere mortals who cannot distinguish a seagull from a gull, just to point out that it takes them several years to mature. And the gray one that you see here in the foreground of this photo and the gray one that's over here, who was actually born on this roof, those are young gulls. And I'm afraid we're going to have to leave the gulls and turn to just a little snippet of some of the great resources that help us identify when we're really interested. I mean, you can sit there and just enjoy without knowing what it is, where it came from, what age it is. But if you're interested in segmenting things up a bit, there are wonderful books available. There are also some great online things. If you're able to take a screenshot, maybe grab one here or come back on the recording and do so. But these are things that help folks who are really interested in getting a little bit more into bird identification and specific bird species. Equipment-wise, binoculars are a must. I mean, honestly, just to prove you can do it now and then, I make Tiffany go out and bird with me without her binoculars. But it's a bit of a thin thing because, you know, they're not interested in being real close. We might eat them or something. This photograph here is at Discovery Park, and people are using binoculars, and they're also, one of them's using what we call a spotting scope or telescope, which really brings in the details of gorgeous plumage and so on. A nice thing to hope for someday. Tiffany, would you give us a few words on ethics to kind of round out our first part?
Absolutely. Well, with birding, we have to respect birds' personal space. So here are a few words on ethical behavior. If you look on the far right, you're going to see this lady she has her binoculars, but she is at a pretty nice distance away from the subject, which is pretty respectful of that bird's space. She's not all up in his face.
Yes, I mean, oftentimes, as Tiffany said, we're in groups, we're looking at our stuff, and one of the things that sometimes seems like a fun thing to do or good thing to do is to play some bird sounds. What do you think about that, Tiffany?
Ooh, that's not very nice to the birds, because around breeding season, they are focusing a lot of their energy on finding a mate. So we don't really want to distract them from that by playing calls of birds that are not really there. So that's taking away precious time from what they're doing.
Or
so
feeding.
We want to just, exactly. They have things to do. We don't want to distract them. We just want to observe and let things happen naturally. In fact, that's the reward.
That's a gorgeous thing to say. That's a gorgeous thing to say. Now, in closing, one little plug or hip hip hooray for something that you know about, that people contribute a great deal to science nowadays. And we've started using the term community science rather than citizen science, but citizen science still rings the right bell. When a bunch of people in an organized fashion go out and gather information on flowers, butterflies, birds, caribou, and those numbers, that data gets put together to give important scientific direction to what's going on. We are just on the cusp of the great backyard bird count. And I know Clarissa and her team might have some other things to say tonight or in other sessions about how you might be interested in participating in the great backyard bird count. It's been going on for, I think, 25 years. Oh, look, it says we're 25 years. It's a 3-day interval, and they ask people to try their best to count at least for 15 minutes. If you're interested, take a look at these websites, and you can get an opportunity to add your 2 cents. As it says here, whether you count one bird or hundreds, participating is easy and fun for all ages. Let birds bring you closer to nature. That is our byline. Thank you very much. I don't know if there are any questions. I know we're going to hold our questions to the end. So let me take this 1 minute on a topic near and dear to our hearts. What can we do to help birds? You know the word snag, I hope, when you catch your sweater, but it also is when there's a dead tree that's still standing, like this one on the right side, that is a snag. And look at all the holes. Those didn't happen by themselves. Those were carved out by woodpeckers, and other birds use them, and other animals and insects, and they are just a tower of life. So leave dead trees standing in place. Don't cut them down. You didn't cut them down, but if you have the opportunity to help try to keep standing trees in place safely, that's a good thing for nature. Clean water available outdoors for birds. Keep cats indoors. Support your local and the larger national and international bird organizations, and sign and support and advocate for organizations that try to reduce ambient light, that's light pollution, and going for bird safe building initiatives. Okay, Clarissa, I'm going to stop sharing with this little gamish of our snowy owl. Thank you.
Thanks, Elaine and Tiffany. I hope that everyone watching is now encouraged to go look for birds. But we're going to move on over to Terrence to talk about the Pigeon Gilmout surveys.
Thank you, Tiffany and Elaine and Clarissa. I'm happy to be here, and I am looking forward to talking with you all tonight about this little fantastic bird. So without further ado, let me go ahead and bring up my presentation. One moment. Okay, let me get my screen all fixed here. Okay, well, I am coming to you from the traditional lands of the Coast Salish and Nisqually peoples. We want to acknowledge the people who came before us and the places that we have the opportunity to walk, enjoy the birds, study the birds. So I'm here today to talk to you about a bird that I study, along with a number of other volunteers and other researchers throughout the region, and that is the Pigeon Gilmout. As you can see here, it is a very beautiful and very vocal bird. So the work that we're doing, it's about, no, why is my slide not working? That's not good. There we go. It's being sponsored by the Nisqually Reach Nature Center. We're a small nonprofit, and we have been focused on education and research for actually 40 years now. This is our 40th anniversary. We're quite excited. So I started with this organization back in 2009 as a volunteer. And in 2014, I was brought on to assist with managing and coordinating the community science or citizen science projects. And the Pigeon Gilmout project was one of those. So just a little bit about my background and how I got into birding. Well, I don't really have a bird that I would say is kind of like my, gateway bird. I will say that when I was an intern with the Washington State Department of Transportation, right after graduating college, I was doing some wetland mitigation work. And with the surveys that we were doing, one of the standard procedures with our survey work before we even got to surveying for plants was actually spend 30 minutes looking for birds on the property. And so this was a way to document the success or lack thereof of the wetland mitigation site. And that was how I really started to get interested in birds, because prior to this, I had pretty much no interest in birds. So fast forward to today, and I am now a casual birder. I'm not a bird nut, but I do get to study birds and I do enjoy it. So the Pigeon Gilmout, let's take a look at some of its basic biology, its breeding biology, and some of its different habitat and food preferences. So the Pigeon Gilmout is a overall black seabird. It has a white wing patch, and within that white wing patch, there is a small black wedge. Another very noticeable feature, especially when the birds are on land, like these two, or when they are flying, is they have bright red to orange feet, and actually their mouth lining is also the same color. So it's actually a really reliable indicator for identification of this species when compared to other seabirds. They actually live and breed in Puget Sound. They, as opposed to other birds, typically do not migrate very long distances. Now, we do know that based on some research down in the Farallon Islands in California, that there are birds from California that do come up to the Washington and British Columbia waters to winter. So there is a local migration that happens. And even with Washington birds, there is a migration to these same areas. So you can see here is an example of a breeding adult bird. Generally, these birds take about 1 year to go from hatchling to developing this classic looking plumage. I already mentioned the white wing patch with the black wedge, although this one really doesn't have much of a wedge at all. And then the red feet and the red mouth lining. But otherwise, it's a black seabird. And this time of year, if you're out on the water or on the beach and you're seeing a lot of black and white seabirds, well, it can definitely be a challenge. But in the summertime, this is actually probably one of the more common seabirds that you'll observe. This is one of my most favorite photos. This is one from one of our former interns and still current volunteers, Shannon Bolt. This is probably a once in a lifetime photo because in the middle, we have a breeding plumage adult. On the left, we have a non-breeding plumage adult. And on the right, we have a fledgling, which is kind of that smudgy in between of being dark and being light. So here's a closer look at the fledgling on the left and then the non-breeding adult on the right. And you can notice how stark the difference is in terms of just how much dark coloration there is on the fledgling as opposed to the non-breeding adult, which has much more white. And something you actually don't really see mentioned in any field guides, but something that I've personally noticed is that with the non-breeding bird, you can see on the right, it's got a little bit of a dark pattern running through the eye, like a mask of some sort. And that's something that I key in on because it's something that is not common to a lot of other seabirds in the wintertime. So as far as the different behaviors that these birds engage in, there's actually quite a number that are pretty common. The billing is probably one of the less common ones, but it is something that you will typically see in the late spring and early summer. You could basically think of it being analogous to humans kissing. While they don't actually touch their bills, they actually get very cozy and they show their love and affection for one another. They're a very vocal bird, but they're also a very showy aerial bird. And this is probably one of the most common breeding behaviors that we see throughout the course of the season and not just a specific time period. And that is the synchronized flying. And this is where there's two birds flying in tandem. They're basically mirroring each other's movements. Oftentimes it's, one chasing after another, kind of like two fighter jets doing a dogfight. So it's pretty exciting to see the birds when they do this. And this is something that we usually see when we're out doing surveys. And so this here is a picture of a very common, classic looking bluff. This is their natural breeding habitat. You'll notice that there are a scattering of various sized holes on this bluff, particularly in the midsection. There are about 3 to 4 burrows here. And here is a look at some of the different ways that these birds use this habitat. So obviously in the middle, we have a pair of birds in a somewhat larger burrow. The average size of a burrow is probably going to be about 4 to 5 inches wide. So it's just big enough to accommodate a bird coming and going. And that's an advantage for these birds to be nesting in these types of habitats where it's a sheer cliff face, which means that there's very few terrestrial predators that can get to the burrows. Being that the entrances are not overly large, it does exclude other larger predators. Now, I should mention that we do see not particularly cohabitation, but we do see other birds using either Gilamot burrows or other different sized burrows. Something I didn't mention about the birds, but it's actually really evident in this photo, is that they have sharp toenails and they can use it for a couple different purposes. So one is like you see 2 birds here, which are doing the classic ledge sitting. Now the one on the left, has a little ledge to actually sit on. And then the one, it's more of an angled position. And so with the sharp toenails, they can hang on to these sheer cliff faces. And another use for these is they actually don't build their own burrows. What they actually do is they use an existing hole and they will use their sharp toenails to enlarge that hole. So sometimes when you come upon a colony and you might observe some burrows with looks like grooves or furrows at the very lower entrance. And that is typically a sign of active Gilamot usage. Now, as far as what they feed to their young, there are actually 2 most common prey items, and that is the sculpin and the gunnel. You can see the sculpin is a fish that has a fairly large head that is a little bit disproportionate to its body. The head's probably the largest part, and then it tapers to the tail. Now, the gunnel, on the other hand, is a very unique fish shape. It is more like, looks like an eel. It is not an eel, it is a fish, and basically looks like a limp noodle. Now the shiner perch, which is something we only occasionally see, is more of your classic looking shape, something your kid would draw and bring home. And so here is an example of a couple adults that are presumably going to be feeding their chicks at some point. On the left, you see a bird with a sculpin, and then a bird on the right with a red gunnel. So that brings us to the community science or citizen science, as Elaine pointed out, work that we do. We have been surveying these birds we are now in our 10th year. That's super exciting. And there's a reason why we are surveying these birds. It's not just because they're charismatic megafauna or just that they're very cute. It is actually because the Puget Sound Partnership, which is a government agency, has actually designated them as an indicator species. Now, there's actually a lot of different what are known as vital signs. So you can see from this very colorful wheel here, there are 5 different metrics that are used to assess the entire health of Puget Sound. And so if you look at the bottom section in the pink, where the orca is, the birds make up a small section of this very large wheel. So within the birds, we are covering both terrestrial and marine birds. And the reason why they are this species, which is one of several other species designated as indicator birds, is because, like I mentioned earlier, they live here year round, they breed here, and they are reliant on fish species that are lower on the food chain. So if these birds are not doing well, that's a warning sign that something is quite wrong with our ecosystem. So I want to talk a little bit about the history of the work that we've done to really understand how we've gotten to where we are now. You need to go back to all the way 20 years ago. Really, really hard to believe that this work has been going on since the folks on Whidbey Island started this as a volunteer-run, Audubon-supported community science effort in 2002. And then we came along around 2011, 2012. And then in 2013, we actually started surveying. And I'll get a little bit more into the background behind how we got to getting started. But I came on in 2014 to assist with monitoring and coordinating all the volunteers. And since then, the program has just taken off, grown wings, and actually, this is not a current slide. We have this last year, East Jefferson County is now part of this. And actually Vashon is not represented here either. So sorry, Vashon. But here's a map showing all the different regions, minus East Jefferson, that are currently being surveyed for Pigeon Gilmout. And so it's really exciting to see how much this effort has grown and how much it has the potential to continue growing. So for bird nights like Elaine, we would certainly love to chat with her about maybe starting up a program in Seattle. I know there's a lot of support up there, so we'll chat about that later. But going back to our efforts here in South Sound. So here's a map of the Nisqually Reach Aquatic Reserve. And on the left, you'll see there are a number of other aquatic reserves. And these aquatic reserves are state designations. The Nisqually Reserve was actually designated for 3 reasons: environmental, scientific, and education. And that trifecta is what makes this aquatic reserve particularly special. And I won't get into all the details about what an aquatic reserve is. If you'd like more information about it, you can hop on DNR's website and find out more. Now, moving on to the specifics of our research, here's a map showing all the different colonies that we have been doing surveys at over the years. Now, again, this is not the most up to date, but it does represent overall the areas within South Puget Sound that we focus on. So mostly around the Olympia area and a little bit further up north on Harstine Island as well. So there's a number of key elements that we survey and collect data on. There's the breeding data. Ultimately, this is a population abundance estimate that we're trying to get. But we're also interested in what sort of disturbances might be impacting the success of their breeding. So looking at population abundance, here is a broad overview without getting very complicated. What you really want to key in on here is notice how the numbers are generally within the 300 to 400 bird range. Now, this isn't supposed to be an accurate census of all the Pigeon Gilmouts in this region. This is just an estimate. And this is based on our survey efforts. We are not surveying the entirety of South Puget Sound, nor are our partners in other regions doing that either. So, but you can see, 300 plus. You can kind of ignore 2013 because that was our first year. So we have definitely grown since that time. And so these bars, they do fluctuate based on the survey effort. So looking at the chick diet prey composition, you'll notice that the gunnels, they are the most dominant prey species that we see being delivered to the burrows to chicks. And there's usually 1 or 2 chicks per brood each year. And this percentage is actually really stable. Just like with the populations of birds, the gunnel diet composition, generally in the 70th percentile. Sculpin, generally in the 20th percentile. and then other, which can be shiner perch or even other random species like snake prickleback or sandlands or any number of oddballs. That's in the 10% range. So now here's an interesting graph. We actually just made this today because I thought I had a graph like this done already and I didn't. So thanks to Chrissy, our intern, for helping put this together. But I want to point your attention to the blue line first. So this graph is showing you the burrow activity, and the blue line represents birds going in without fish or no prey. You'll notice that early in the season, it's high, it plateaus, then it starts going down, and then towards the later part of July, it peaks again, and then it just flatlines. Now, there's an interesting intersection kind of in mid to late June, where there's a decrease in the number of no prey visits, and then all of a sudden, the number of fish deliveries just starts going through the roof. And then you'll see it actually has a double peak, which actually is pretty common from what we've seen in our previous data from other years. I actually neglected to put what year this data is from, so I should say that this is for 2021. And it's generally the same pattern. Now, what I really wanted to show with this graph, and it didn't bear out with this year's data, but typically you would see a larger peak for the no prey visits prior to the peaks for the fish deliveries. So the general pattern with the breeding ecology of the birds is late spring, probably May. That's when it's just busy town. There's birds shopping for their burrows, finding the best one to lay their eggs in, and then there's their actual breeding. You can actually see these birds just mating on the beach. It's kind of the one more fascinating things. They can almost walk right up to them and they'll not really care too much. But like Elaine said, sometimes you get to be a voyeur. And then in June, you typically are looking at the incubation period, which is about 30 to 40 days, after which the eggs hatch. Again, there's 1 to 2 eggs per brood. And then for about the next 4 to 5 weeks, you're generally going to be looking at chicks being fed on a frequent basis. Now, here's actually a really interesting fact that I found out from a study that was done way back in the 70s. But what they found was that generally speaking, when the chicks first hatch, they get fed often and they get fed lots and lots of small fish. But as the chicks get older, the frequency of meals actually decreases. So instead of maybe having like 5-10 meals per day, they're down to like maybe a handful at most. And as they get really old, then it's like, oh, maybe you only get 1 square meal a day. But conversely, the fish get bigger. So there's an energy trade-off there. And also, well, when they're chicks, they can't really swallow a big giant sculpin or a big long noodly gunnel. So, but you can see for both no prey and prey, they both essentially start flatlining after August. So you're thinking, wow, these are really cool birds. I'm wondering how to get involved. So there's a lot of different reasons why. One, hey, who doesn't love this little cute guy or girl? They're actually not sexually dimorphic, so you can't tell the males from the females. But for some people, it's the highlight of their week. Some people love to just enjoy their morning coffee on the beach. But here's what we're looking for when we are trying to conduct surveys. We are generally doing these surveys for 1 hour in the morning. We're typically on the beach no later than 7:30, and we're collecting data on the number of pigeon gilmots we see, what kind of burrow activity is happening. Are they bringing fish back? What kind of fish are they bringing back? What time are they going to the burrows? And then we're also looking at other disturbances like eagles or boats or people walking their dogs on the beach. So there's a lot of very not terribly sophisticated data, but the data that we are collecting is actually being used by the state to monitor the population trends. So that's a really exciting aspect of the work that we're doing. We're not just doing it because we think this is cool or, you know, just in the name of science. Well, it is in the name of science, but it is for a very legitimate reason, and because the state just does not have the resources to study these birds. So I do want to acknowledge a lot of the different partners that we work with, partners who fund us or partners who provide support in other ways. First and foremost, I want to just acknowledge the Salish Sea Gilamot Network. It's a consortium of different groups, all the 7 different groups that I talked about earlier. Those are all members of this group. And while we are not a nonprofit, we are an organized group that meets on a regular basis to talk shop and talk strategy and all that, pretty much everything Gilamot. So with that, I will leave you with my contact information, as well as some other links to other information that you can look at on your own time. So with that, I will turn it back over to Clarissa, and I will stop sharing my screen.
That's really cool that we've got a bird that can help us determine if the Salish Sea is a healthy environment. We can get right into questions, and one of them is for you, Terrence. Do you ever find injured birds while doing surveys or bird watching? And what should we do? I have not found an injured
bird. Actually, we very rarely even find dead birds. Now, the one most common item that we do find are actually eggshells, because typically our beaches, unless we're seeing very high tides, which are not common when the eggs would have hatched, the very, very upper portion of the beach directly adjacent to the bluff is typically a very dry zone. And so, you know, if an egg shell falls out and it lands just right there and doesn't wash out, you know, we sometimes do find those, and those are pretty fun. And actually, I got to work with a graduate student from University of Washington on her thesis project. She did a isotopic analysis of eggshells, Pigeon Gilmots from all around Puget Sound. So I got to spend one summer collecting eggshells for her. And so that gave me an excuse to get out of the office and get away from the computer.
That's cool. That's good to know that we're not seeing a lot of injured birds out there when you're doing surveys, and you're just getting to see their cute little eggshells. Elaine, did you have a question? Or?
Is it okay?
Sure.
Terrence, I'm so happy to see your work. Pigu, P-I-G-U, Pigeon Gilmots are one of my favorites. I say that a lot. That red mouth and those red feet. May I ask a question? And for people in the audience who might not know about bird banding, it's a way of identifying a single individual species so that you can potentially identify what it's done over time. Is there any banding that's done with your group of pigeon?
No, but that is a really, really good question, because we've actually been interested in banding these birds. Now, I have looked into the possibility of doing that, and it's a little more involved than you might imagine. It's not just as simple as going out and catching a bird and then putting a band on it and releasing it. You know, you got to apply for permits, and you got to come up with a study plan, and you basically have to justify your reason for doing this. Now, we have plenty of justification for doing it. So it's just really a matter of putting in the time to put together the application and work with some collaborators, because one of the key requirements is actually having experience with banding, which I do not have. And the seabird biologists I know who study other similar burrow nesting seabirds, they are typically quite busy. So hopefully someday I can tag along with those scientists and get some informal training on how to band seabirds and handle them properly. But we've also thought about the possibility of maybe doing some artificial nest box studies, which could provide a viable way to gain other information about them. But one of the challenges of banding seabirds is that, well, they spend a lot of time on the water. So their legs are underwater, which means you are reliant on them being on land to actually see their bands. Yeah.
Great. I'm gonna get some questions going into Elaine and Tiffany's inbox. You can decide which of you wants this question. Do pine siskins build nests or nest in tree cavities? I think, Elaine, you're muted.
I need to be muted throughout most of my life, but not right this second. They must be. They are passerines. That's a word that you never need to think of again, but they are birds that are in the group that does make nests. I've never seen a thingy nest because they don't nest down where we are. They nest in the higher areas of fir trees, but I can't wait to look that up and we can all do it together.
And then Tiffany, how do Anna's hummingbirds stay warm in snowy weather?
That is a really great question because when we think of hummingbirds, we typically relate them with warmer weather. Well, Anna's hummingbirds are the only hummingbirds that I know that overwinter here in Western Washington. And how they stay warm, like all birds, they puff their, well, most birds, they puff their feathers up to trap heat. So when you are walking and you see, if your eye is sharp enough to spot a hummingbird perched in the tree and it looks kind of like puff, like very puffy and cute, it's really just trying to stay warm.
Cute little puffballs.
we were just out. Was it you and me or me and someone? But we were looking at hummingbirds. Two little addendum to what Tiffany said. This is fascinating. And I bet some of you hang sugar water for hummingbirds. And I bet a lot of you hopefully do try to facilitate the planting of native plants. And if you're not, Green Seattle Partnership and other entities that take care of our green spaces do. And here's something that maybe everyone knows. 25 or 30 years ago, we had no hummingbirds in this part of the state in the winter. They all migrated south to California because of food and because of people planting native plants that bloom and carry food sources for hummingbirds and putting out sugar water. We have changed the whole life pattern of the honest hummingbird. They're only on the west. The other sides of the countries have some other hummingbirds, and at least I don't know much about them, but the honest hummingbird has actually changed within our lifetime their migratory habits because of what humans do. The other thing that Tiffany was going to say was the word torpor. Torpor, weren't you? That is the bird's ability to bring its heart rate and its whole metabolism down to almost death. I mean, it is incredible that the question was how do they stay warm, but the question really should be how they stay alive. And part of it is they let themselves go down to almost dead. And, you know, we had snow all around our region, just a month ago, and there were a lot of folks who were quite worried, and there's no way to tell exactly, but we did have a lot of folks asking, do we need to do anything in keeping their hummingbird feeders from freezing, so on? That was a really important thing. And here's a pine siskin nest. Technology. Oh.
Glad we answered two questions in one there.
That's fun. Too much fun here.
And then we're going to throw it back to Terrence with how does weather affect surveys? Rainy weather, fewer dogs, but more boats maybe. Do volunteers
Yeah,
care about the weather?
we go out, rain or shine, and fortunately we get to survey mostly in the summertime. So it's generally pretty nice, although this last summer, I happened to be out on one of the weekends when it was just freaking hot out. And it was like 7 o'clock and it must have been already like 70 out on the beach. Like I was like shedding layers as fast as I could because it was just like, and it was actually really smoky too, which made it even more challenging. But yeah, no, we were out there all the time, and we do get some areas where when it's the middle of summer, we get more boat traffic. But yeah, weather is really kind of a non-factor for us. Now we do also do winters. Well, we do non-breeding surveys from September through May. So there are time periods when actually tides are probably more of a bigger factor in the non-breeding season than the weather. Although if it's freezing cold and icy and snowy out, then of course we stay on. But
yeah, wouldn't think that it'd be tides. You'd think it'd be weather, but that's cool to know.
I have a tiny silly comment about 8 years ago when I first started to join one of the Seattle Audubon sponsored monthly surveys. It's every Saturday, first Saturday of the month, and it was an awful Friday. And I wrote to my supervisor and I said, "What do we do if it's raining tomorrow?" This is land birds. She said, "Birds have to eat. We go out in all conditions." And that's just become the way you go. You just put on different clothing and get ready to take a nice hot shower when you come in. And it's all for a great, great cause. Yay for community science.
Yay for braving the elements. Another question, all three of you can chime in with this one, is which element of a bird's anatomy do you find most fascinating?
Come on, Tiffany. Put some spice on it. Oh, wait. Tiffany, do you have some of your bird part anatomy art?
Oh,
we lost Tiffany.
Oh, darn. Tiffany's an artist as well as a very, very fine birder, but and a mommy, if you heard some little voices back there. She makes birds out of pipe cleaners that are quite stunningly realistic. Tiffany, have you ever made a Pigeon Gilmout? You should. Oh, there she is.
I was really thinking that too throughout the presentation. I was like, I should totally make that.
I'll buy one from you. Pipe cleaners.
Hey, let's do it. Let's chop it up.
Okay.
Okay, now we're on the same plane. My favorite part of birding. Oh, okay. I'll fly because I fly Delta. My favorite part of bird anatomy has to be actually the bills. I think the bills are, every bird has a different shaped bill adapted to their diet. And it's just amazing to see the diversity of bird bills. Look at the snow goose. If you Google snow goose and look at the bill, you'll see these kind of frilly things over on the side. That's to filter out, that's to sift through vegetation. And as they're grazing, it's pretty amazing how birds have bills that help them eat the food that they need to eat. Also look at finches on Galapagos Island too. That's a very great lesson on how bird bills evolved according to their food source.
Terrence.
I'm still thinking of mine. I don't really have a particular part of the bird anatomy that I would say is my favorite. So, Elaine, do you have something?
Well, I mean, Tiffany's right. The bill defines the survival in so many ways. I mean, feathers and wings, but I have to say, I guess, the eyes in the eye region. There's probably more than one book written just on the visual system and the eyes of birds. They do have special features, and you know, we know something about raptors. By the way, what's a raptor, Tiffany?
That's an excellent question. When we hear the word raptor, most of the time our minds go straight to I don't know if I'm allowed to say Jurassic Park 3 with the giant Dromaeosaurus. Ooh,
Velociraptor. Yeah.
Well,
whoa.
Well, but the real velociraptors were about cat size. So the ones in the movie were Deinonychus. But anyway, raptors. So raptors describes the grasping or the feet. And as you know, velociraptors had that one long claw to jab, jab, jab. But raptors, at least when we're talking about modern day dinosaurs, which are birds, we're talking about the grasping. So the grabbing of prey. Eagles, they grab their prey.
Yeah, so the part that came through that was a raptor is a flesh-eating bird that's designed to tear flesh and is a predator. And so you said the bill, and it's also the feet in part. I mean, we have a little insight into there's some birds that have feathered legs, some that have bare legs. Go back to, say, a turkey vulture with the 6-foot wingspan. They have no feathers anywhere. They're adapted so they can stick their heads inside, you know, dead buffaloes or whatever, and not come out covered with, you know what. So there's so many great adaptations. But the visual system is a little bit different from, I guess, a body part. But oh my gosh, yes. I'll say visual system.
We got claws, we got beaks, we've got claws, we got the eyes. I mean, Terrence, I think you're a fan of the plumage, really.
I mean, I guess so. If I had to choose, then yeah, you know, because plumage is definitely one of the biggest identification marks on almost any bird. And what I think is most fascinating, and this comes partially from studying birds like the Pigeon Gilmout, because I am so focused on one species that I see so much variation in plumages, especially with non-breeding birds where there isn't such a well-defined pattern to it. So it makes it for a challenging bird to try and identify. And even when you look at other birds, I mean, I think I'm following the Western Washington Birders Facebook group. And in the last year or so, there has been just an amazing number of leucistic birds reported. I mean, I have never, before like a couple of years ago, I had never even heard of such a thing. And now it's like, it's common. And I actually got to one time see a leucistic crow, which I just found out from one of our volunteers, it might have been a crow that was born several years ago from the same area. So yeah, Elaine.
Terrence, I think our 40 some odd people that are joining us might need you to back up just a teensy bit. Leucistic or leucistic, could you tell us what that means?
Yeah, I apologize for not really going into detail about what that means. So a leucistic bird is actually different from an albino bird. But in either case, what you're looking at is a bird that has an abnormal amount of white in its appearance. Now, an albino bird can be a true albino, which is completely stark white, with pink eyes. And those typically have very low survival because they stand out. And then there's also the partial albino, which is also stark white, but does not have the pink eye. Now, leucistic or leucistic birds, those are birds that they have a lot of white on them, but they're not completely white. So they are recognizable as a particular species based on other features, but for whatever reason, there's a mutation that has caused them to develop a very white appearance. So.
Can I test, Terrence?
Yes.
Tell me what this bird is.
Ooh, that looks like,
Are you there, Tiffany? You went away.
It's got a short little sharp bill, so, and it's kind of got a squat body. So
and the lower mandible is orangey yellow, and the upper mandible is a little different. But you know, it's a wonderful thing. The dichotomy between when we talk about a species like the pigeon guillemots, we can't tell one from another if they don't have bands or something. But when there's a bird who, from a mutation in its genetic pigment, turns out to look like this. When this bird showed up in Discovery Park in 2016, I'm going to tell you that I didn't see it myself. This is someone else's photo, but for any birders who are out there, hopefully you're saying, well, it looks like a sparrow and it's got a really tall head and you can't tell how big it is, but it's a fox sparrow. If you could color the parts to be just like a fox sparrow or just look at the outline, that might convince you. But when that bird came back the next year, we could tell it was that bird. So it's this wonderful comparison between talking about species and talking about individuals. And when there's a bird that's got some funny white, or maybe it lost a few feathers over here, at least for that season, you can actually bond with Joe Sparrow or Jeannie Junco, or you have this wonderful appreciation of the individual. That's kind of fun thing. I wanted to go back just a teensy bit. We were talking about Tiffany, we lost her, but she was talking about velociraptors, and she reminded me, for those who are interested in evolution, you know, when when I looked at my childhood dinosaur books, they were all these scaly things, right? And does everybody know that now science has proven that many dinosaurs had feathers, and that actually dinosaurs and birds are closer than we thought? And I just pasted in a lovely little lively and artistically wonderful video. It's called More Than Birds. And if some of you remember the lovely song More Than Words, anyway, if you're able to grab that URL and take a look, I think you'll enjoy it.
Well, I think we've kept everyone long enough. I'm sorry this one went a bit over, but it's just so much fun to learn about birds.
Please don't be sorry.
I'll send your other questions to Tiffany, Elaine, and Terrence and see if they want to answer those, and then we'll post them in the Facebook comments. But I want to thank you all for watching another Discovery Speaker Series. And all your great questions. There are even more in the comments, and wish we could get to them all. We do have another Discovery Speaker Series happening on March 3rd, and that one will be about water quality. So if you're interested in learning about Olympia's water quality, we're actually going to hear from the school kids who have been studying it and going to these rivers and testing them. And so we'll get to hear firsthand from them about their research that they've done on water quality. So make sure that you keep an eye out for that as well. We'll put Elaine and Tiffany's video into the comments section below so you can watch that again, go virtual birding with them again, and that More Than Birds YouTube video. And we can post Terrence's information too, if you want to reach out and do some Pigeon Gilmout spotting. So thank you so much, everyone, for watching. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your evening.
Thank you, Clarissa. Thank you, Puget Sound Estuarium.
Thank you. Have a good night.